The email landed in my inbox at 9:07 in the morning. Subject line: Compliance freeze effective immediately. It was signed by Damien Cade himself, CC'd to the entire executive board. And beneath his neat signature was a line that read, almost casually, pending internal review of Ms. Dada. Park's recent audit irregularities. He'd done it. Made it sound like I was the scandal. I could almost hear the smirk in his words. The same smirk that used to hover over my desk when he stole my work and called it mentoring. He expected panic. Maybe tears. Maybe apologies. Instead, I moved the email into a folder named Receipts. What he didn't know was that his own words had been there for months. Every order, every mockery, every piece of evidence. This was just the final entry before the ledger closed. 2 weeks earlier, I had found the buried thread in a compliance export he never thought I'd check. Our little audit mouse will never notice, he wrote. Scrub the timestamps and move the logs. Those words hit harder than any insult he'd ever said to my face. That night flashed back to me cold noodles in a paper cup. My mother's voice on the phone asking if I'd eaten. While Damien was in Bali with donors. I'd even wired my own travel advance to cover a missing workshop fee he'd charged as optics. He'd laughed. Said, "You're a lifesaver. Noelle." And I believed him. He used to call me the detail girl. Half compliment. Half leash. I see now that my silence wasn't obedience. It was recording time. 6 months earlier, at the Partner Summit, he had stood beneath stage lights with my analysis behind him. My charts. My late nights. My formulas. My fingerprints. Gone, he'd said. My innovation team built a new transparency model, while I sat in the crowd, clapping like a ghost. Afterward, he told me, real leaders know when to let others take the spotlight. That night, I walked home in the cold, repeating his phrase, real leaders, while staring at my reflection in a shop window and promising myself I would never clap for theft again. When review season came, Damien gave me meets expectations. He said I lacked vision. He said I took things too personally. He told HR I was detail-focused but not strategic. The irony almost made me laugh. He used my details to build his vision. But I swallowed it. Because I needed the job. Because my mother's prescriptions cost too much to lose a paycheck over pride. He leaned across the table, smiled, and said, "That's why you'll never lead." I remember walking home repeating those words until they turned into fuel. He didn't know I was already documenting everything he said. At the donor mixer, he introduced me as the back-end technician who keeps my numbers clean. Laughter. Glasses clinking. He raised his glass toward me like I was his maid. I smiled back. Later, I deleted the speech I had ghostwritten for him from the shared drive, but I saved a copy on my private one, timestamped, version controlled. He thought silence was weakness. He never realized silence can be a weapon. After a Grant discrepancy, he pushed a process alignment memo across my desk. He said it was procedural. He watched me sign. Later, he waved it in a call as proof I had endorsed his actions. I had only written reviewed, not approved. 2 missing words that would become my shield. Arrogance always leaves fingerprints. Then came the travel budget swap. He reclassified my field visit so he could bill his luxury resort weekend as strategic outreach. I lived off oatmeal packets that month because my reimbursement vanished. In the newsletter, there he was smiling on a yacht under the headline, "Leading with Purpose." I saved the photos under workshop expenses. I knew someday they'd balance a line in the audit trail. Numbers never forget. When I tried to transfer departments, HR said the role had been redefined. Later I found out Damien had called first, saying I was brilliant but unstable. I was in therapy then, managing burnout. He'd once seen me pause to breathe and said, "You should be careful, Noelle. People might think you're fragile." He turned my recovery into ammunition. He called my panic attacks brand issues. I learned that honesty, in his world, was self-harm. Still, I stayed. Because documentation needs time. The night before the audit, I worked until midnight. When I returned, my access was revoked. My folder gone. Damien smiled, told the team it was a system glitch. Later, I heard him whisper, "Delay the packet." Let her sweat. I did sweat rebuilding from backups, rewriting, double-checking everything. He interrupted the auditors, saying, "Noelle tends to overcomplicate things." He smiled at them like a savior, and at me like a warning. But that morning, my offline archive had already synced automatically. Every deletion, every version, every timestamp. He wanted me to sweat. I wanted him to sign his own noose. So when his compliance freeze email came, I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I just added it to the folder. Every betrayal had a line. Every insult had a timestamp. Every sacrifice had proof attached. He thought this was the day I'd break. He didn't realize it was the day the books finally balanced. The next morning, I walked into the office as if nothing had happened. People whispered, glancing at me over their screens. The words "compliance freeze" drifting like smoke. Damien was already in the glass conference room, laughing too loudly, shaking hands with a board member, as if he hadn't just tried to bury me alive. He looked at me once, just once, and that was enough. The smirk said, "You're done." But he was wrong. I was only getting started. The freeze meant he'd overplayed. It meant he'd gotten nervous. When men like Damien panic, they make mistakes. They start to write more emails. They start to leave fingerprints. I kept my voice calm when I greeted the receptionist. I even thanked Damien for updating the team. He didn't realize every word I spoke was bait. The first trap was simple, forwarding one of his past adjustment emails to myself using the compliance system's built-in relay. He'd forgotten I still had peripheral permissions. I sent it at 9:43, flagged it as follow-up on grant discrepancy. That single act mirrored his own paper trail. The investigation would soon start chasing its own tail, his. That night, I stayed in the empty office again. My only light, the monitor glow, and a vending machine hum. I opened the export folder and began naming subfolders by emotion instead of project codes. Mockery. Theft. Gaslight. Smear. Each one filled quickly. Then I created a fifth resolution. That one stayed empty for now. He made his next move faster than I expected. 3 days later, an internal notice went out. Anonymous ethics complaint under review. HR said they couldn't discuss details, but everyone already knew. Damien had filed it. He accused me of creating a hostile audit environment and targeting leadership. I almost admired the precision of his projection. I remembered a Friday night when he'd stormed into my office, waving a spreadsheet. "You're obsessed with decimals," he said. "No one cares about your decimals." I'd apologized. Then I'd stayed until dawn fixing the decimals anyway, saving the organization thousands. Now, he called that hostility. I forwarded the ethics complaint to myself too, tagging it Act I. Because every accusation he made only mirrored what he'd done. The archive was becoming symmetrical, his crimes mapped perfectly against his lies. The next loop came with his favorite ritual, the weekend urgent request. Late Saturday, he sent a message, marked critical, asking me to clean data discrepancies by Monday. I was exhausted, but I opened my laptop anyway, eating crackers for dinner. I worked 12 hours straight while he posted pictures from a rooftop brunch mimosas. Ocean view. Caption, impact, work never sleeps. It wasn't cruelty by accident. It was design. He thrived on control, on the quiet devotion of overworked subordinates. What he didn't realize was that I screenshotted everything: his brunch, his timestamps, my system logs. I compared his post time with the moment he marked the audit urgent. They overlapped perfectly. When I saw it, I smiled. Proof doesn't need anger. It just needs patience. By Monday, I was too tired to speak. He walked by my desk, pretending concern. "Rough weekend?" he asked. I looked at him and said, "Productive." He chuckled. "That's my girl." I didn't answer. That moment, I realized silence unsettled him more than confrontation ever could. A week later came the bonus meeting. He gathered the team and announced shared performance rewards. He thanked everyone, praised the collaborative spirit. My name wasn't mentioned. But later, I checked payroll reports and saw that the bonus distribution had been rerouted. The funds I'd earned were logged under his assistant's ID. Administrative correction, the note said. I laughed quietly, screenshot the line, and moved it into theft. The following month, I tried to apply for an external posting in another department. The recruiter told me the reference call had gone oddly short. "Your supervisor said you were talented, but reactive." The word hit me like static. I knew exactly who had said it. Damien. The man whose temper cracked glass panels during meetings now branded me as reactive. I wrote it down in my notebook. Pen steady. Words matter. Especially his. Then came the lockout. I logged in one morning to find every permission revoked again. Damien shrugged. "System migration," he said. "You'll get access later." But I'd already cloned my files days before, anticipating his tactic. He thought he was isolating me. He was preserving evidence. I didn't argue. I just nodded, letting him believe I was helpless. People like Damien mistake restraint for weakness. It's their favorite illusion. His arrogance grew as he felt the pressure tighten. He started showing off again, posting selfies with donors, holding wine glasses, tagging transparency partners. He didn't know I was cross-referencing every post with finance logs. One night, I matched a hotel charge, marked impact outreach with his post location, a private villa, 2 hours from headquarters. The receipt and the photo fit together like lock and key. I saved it beside another message of his where he'd written, "If compliance asks, say I was at the workshop." I looked at that line for a long time, letting it sink in. The same week I'd skipped meals to finish his report. He was lying to cover his spa weekend. That was the contrast. My hunger against his luxury. My exhaustion against his performance. A few days later, he scheduled what he called an alignment meeting. It was his favorite kind of ambush public. Performative. All smiles. "We just want to make sure Noelle's approach matches leadership expectations," he said, gesturing toward the boardroom screen. I nodded. I agreed with everything he said. I took notes in silence. Every fake compliment, every backhanded remark, every word that could later be quoted in context. When he smiled, satisfied, I smiled too. He didn't notice that my phone, resting beside the notepad, was recording the call. Not to leak. Not yet. Just a timestamp. His phrasing. His tone. His laughter. Because one day, that same tone would convict him. His last attempt to corner me came disguised as generosity. He invited me to collaborate on the next quarterly report. He said it would rebuild trust. I accepted. What he didn't realize was that the shared document automatically logged every keystroke, every edit, every deletion his undoing. In plain text. When I opened the report later, I saw he had replaced my section titles with vague summaries. Operational integrity review became efficiency feedback. He was rewriting history, one euphemism at a time. I restored the version history and exported it complete with his deletions and remarks. That file joined the others in the receipts folder. By then, I had built a lattice of proof so complete it could stand on its own. My silence wasn't surrender anymore. It was architecture. He thought he was writing my ending. In reality, he was signing the preface to his downfall. That night, I stayed late again. I opened the resolution folder for the first time and typed a single line, "Prepare summary for Q2 review." The quarterly board review would be streamed to donors, press, and partners. Damien loved being on camera. He called it his stage. He had no idea that his performance would soon become a confession. I left the office close to midnight. The hallway was empty, the lights motionless. For the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid. I felt precise. Everything was where it belonged. The emails, the receipts, the proof, the silence, all in order. He believed the world would always protect men like him, the loud ones, the charming ones, the thieves who call it leadership. He never understood that people like me, the quiet ones, build ledgers. And ledgers always balance in the end. The review day arrived dressed like any other coffee cups. Polished shoes. Screens flickering with optimism. Damien was in his element, shaking hands, clapping shoulders, laughing too loudly. The quarterly impact review was his favorite stage, and this time it was live-streamed. Donors, partners, staff, every face was watching. He wore confidence like armor, convinced that control was permanent. I took my seat near the back, notebook closed, hands still. He didn't know that I had the one file that would undo every carefully arranged lie. He began with charm. "This quarter," he said, "our transparency systems achieved historic efficiency." The words rolled off his tongue like honey over poison. Behind him, the presentation changed slides. My charts again colors, labels, the exact phrasing I'd written months earlier. He didn't even bother to edit the typos I'd left as markers. The board applauded. The donors smiled. He turned toward me mid-applause, the faintest grin, daring me to react. I didn't. I smiled back, because the same file he was displaying was about to become the evidence that buried him. When he finished, the moderator asked if I had anything to add from the audit team. I stood, calm, voice steady. Just a few clarifications, I said. The room quieted. I clicked my tablet. A time-stamped folder opened on the screen. Original version, history. The header matched his slide exactly. Except for one thing. The author tag read, "Created by Noel Park." For a moment, silence. Then whispers. Damien's smile froze. Just slightly. "Of course. It's a team effort," he said quickly. But the metadata kept flashing dates. Usernames. Comments. It wasn't a speech anymore. It was a mirror. He tried to pivot. Charming again. "Technical details," he said, "don't always reflect the collaboration process." I nodded. "True," I said, "which is why I saved the collaboration records." I opened the next folder, his internal message chain, his adjustment emails. One line filled the main screen. "Our little audit mouse will never notice. Scrub the timestamps and move the logs." The room shifted. Someone in the back gasped. I remembered the night he wrote that message, the one where I stayed in the office until dawn reconciling every discrepancy he'd caused. My sacrifice against his arrogance. I had spent nights living on instant noodles while he drank champagne with donors. That was the vile contrast. He had mocked integrity while feasting on it. Now, his own words gleamed under the projector lights like confession tape. He laughed nervously. "Old banter," he said. Taken out of context. He turned to the moderator for help. No one moved. The donors stared at the screen. I let the silence work. Silence has gravity when truth sits inside it. Then I said, "There's context." I clicked again. The next email appeared, his request to clean inconsistencies before the auditors arrive. The same week he told me, "Don't overcomplicate things. Noel." I remembered crying quietly in the office bathroom that day, and holding my phone with my mother's voicemail. "You're working too hard, sweetheart." I hadn't told her that my overtime wasn't even logged because Damien had reclassified it as advisory support. He had stolen my hours, my credit, and my peace, and he called it leadership. I looked at him now, hands trembling just slightly. The same man who once told me I'd never lead now couldn't meet my eyes. He tried one last defense. "She's misrepresenting casual messages." He raised his voice to the board. "She's bitter." I stayed calm. "Am I?" I said. Then I opened the next file, his reimbursement claim marked strategic outreach. The attached receipt showed a 5-star villa invoice dated the same weekend I had submitted a request for travel reimbursement that went missing. The juxtaposition burned bright. "That," I said, "is the workshop." Damien's color drained. The donors exchanged glances. The head of compliance shifted forward. "Is that a personal expense, under the impact account?" one asked. "It's a categorization error," Damien replied, voice thinning. I didn't need to respond. The document spoke louder than any argument could. Numbers, names, timestamps, they don't lie. The moderator cleared his throat. "Ms. Park, do you have additional materials?" I nodded. "Yes. This memo." The alignment document he had coerced me into signing appeared on screen. "Please notice," I said. The line reads, "Reviewed, not approved." The supposed consent doesn't exist. The room went utterly still. Even his assistant, always quick to laugh at his jokes, stared at her notepad. I remembered how small I'd felt the day I signed that paper, with him hovering above me. I had done it to protect a program that fed hundreds of families. I had sacrificed dignity for duty. He had taken that act of faith and forged it into a weapon. That's what betrayal feels like, a theft of the invisible. But invisible things can be proven too, if you keep the right records. Damien's hand twitched near his tablet. He was sweating now. "This is absurd," he said. "If she really had issues, why not report earlier?" I met his eyes. "Because I was documenting," I said. My voice stayed even, colder than anger. "Because every time I spoke up, you told me I was overreacting. So I wrote instead. I wrote everything down." Gasps. A murmur spread. The lead donor whispered something to the chairperson. The air in the room thickened. For the first time, Damien's arrogance cracked. He tried to interrupt, but the moderator raised a hand. "Let her finish." I opened one last folder, titled Correspondence Summary. It contained his directives to falsify expense logs. The email header showed the internal IT timestamp proving it was sent from his account. And beneath it, a line that everyone in the room read in silence. "Noelle is too meticulous. Delay her packet until after review." That was the knife. The room broke into quiet disbelief. Someone whispered, "This is serious." The donors exchanged uneasy looks. The head of compliance stood. "Mr. Cade," she said, "we'll need to verify these immediately." His mouth opened, but no words came. I remembered his exact words months ago, "You'll never lead." Now the entire organization was looking at me for direction. I looked at the board calmly and said, "All files are stored on a mirrored server. I'll provide access after the session." "No emotion. No, pride. Just order." He turned toward me, voice shaking. "You think this makes you right?" he hissed. I met his gaze. "No," I said quietly. "The data does." The moderator ended the session abruptly. The live stream feed cut out, but the damage was already viral. Donors had recorded the slides. Screenshots were spreading before the meeting even adjourned. Damien tried to smile, to charm, to joke, but no one laughed. His assistant quietly packed her things. When the board members left, I stayed seated, notebook still closed. My pulse was steady. For the first time, he couldn't fill the silence. His voice had no power here. He stood by the door, looking smaller, almost human. "You planned this," he said. I didn't answer. He was right. Of course. He just didn't understand how long it had taken. Every insult, every theft, every false accusation, each one a brick in the trap he built himself. I just waited until he was standing in the center, before I sealed it shut. As I walked out, the receptionist handed me my badge, eyes wide. "That was incredible," she whispered. I smiled softly. "It was accounting," I said. Because that's all it ever was. Numbers balanced. Lies corrected. Ledgers closed. I didn't look back at Damien. I didn't need to. The truth was already echoing in every hallway, every inbox, every whispered message spreading through the building. By the time I reached the elevator, I heard the first door slam behind me, the sound of security beginning its work. For years, he'd made me believe that silence meant weakness. But now I knew silence can be exact, sharp, surgical. It doesn't shout. It cuts. When I returned to the office the next morning, the world felt quieter. No one greeted Damien. His corner glass room, once the loudest place in the building, was empty. The blinds were half closed, his mug still on the desk. I didn't touch it. I just stood there, watching the sunlight cut across his empty chair, and realized the storm was finally shifting direction. The board had acted overnight. The livestream clips spread across donor forums, internal channels, and press threads faster than anyone could contain them. Words like misconduct, audit breach, and ethical collapse floated in headlines before sunrise. Damien's name was no longer followed by CEO. It was followed by former. I didn't celebrate. I made tea and opened my laptop, calm as ever. My inbox was a river of replies, thank yous, apologies, statements of support. Even a few confessions, colleagues admitting they'd known something was wrong but stayed silent. I didn't resent them. Fear makes people small. I knew that better than anyone. That morning, compliance sent a verification notice. Please confirm original archive source. I clicked reply all and attached the mirrored drive logs. Each one showed a clean, traceable record from the company server to my local backup. Every checksum matched. It wasn't vengeance, it was closure by documentation. Hours later, the final meeting began. The board called it a remediation session. Damien was there. Pâle, his tie loosened, his voice hoarse. He tried to open with charm, but no one laughed. Across the table, the lead donor's face was expressionless. Mr. Cade, she said evenly, you authorized expense reclassification that violates our grant covenants. He stammered something about interpretation. Then she read from his own email, if compliance asks, say I was at the workshop. There was nowhere left to hide. He looked at me then, searching for some fragment of sympathy. I didn't offer any. This wasn't revenge, it was arithmetic. What he stole had been returned to balance. They asked me to walk them through the evidence one last time. I explained everything with the same tone I'd used for years, precise, patient, unemotional. Every timestamp, every receipt, every contradiction. When I finished, the room was silent. Then the chairperson spoke, effective immediately. Mr. Cade's contract is terminated. Ms. Park, we'd like you to oversee the corrective task force. He laughed bitterly. You're making her a saint now. The chairperson ignored him. We're correcting records, not rewriting faith. He slammed his folder shut. You think this erases me? I met his eyes. No. You erased yourself. Security entered quietly. The sound of his badge deactivating echoed through the speakers. His face drained of color. He looked around, but the allies who once mirrored his arrogance were staring at the table. No one met his gaze. When he passed by me, he whispered, "You planned this." I whispered back, "I learned it from you." After he was gone, the room exhaled. The donors filed out, murmuring relief, staff whispering gratitude. I gathered my notes, closed my laptop, and slipped the drive into my bag. It was over. But justice doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like silence steady, absolute, I walked to the balcony overlooking the city. The same skyline I'd stared at for years through exhaustion now shimmered differently. It wasn't triumph, it was clarity. Every document, every night of restraint, every humiliation had all built to this quiet equilibrium. My new role began that afternoon. Compliance Reconstruction Lead. The title didn't matter. What mattered was that no one could bury truth again, not while the ledgers lived. As I walked past the reception desk, the young intern smiled nervously. "You're incredible," she said. I smiled back. "No. Just accurate." In the elevator, I watched my reflection in the metal doors. There was no joy, only steadiness. My silence had built the trap, and his arrogance had sprung it. Poetic justice doesn't shout, it whispers through balance sheets. When the elevator opened, a journalist waited in the lobby. Microphone raised. "Miss Park, do you have any comment on Mr. Asian?" Cade's dismissal. I looked straight at the camera. "Transparency is not punishment," I said. "It's correction." Then I walked away. Outside, the air smelled like rain. For a moment, I thought of my mother, her voice saying, "You always notice details, others miss." Maybe that had been both my curse and my weapon. I didn't look back at the building. Some ledgers are better left closed. That night, I opened my personal journal for the first time in years. One line filled the page. He thought silence was weakness. It was evidence. The next morning, the news confirmed it. Contracts revoked. Grants restored. Internal reforms launched. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt balanced. The world would move on, but the record would stay clean. Numbers don't lie. They only wait for someone patient enough to read them. I closed my laptop, exhaled slowly, and let the quiet fill the room. The ledger was complete, and,